What's going on, guys? Waco from Revolution here in Midview City, here with the incredibly talented Bradley Tan, a guy that I consider to be one of the two top black and gray tattoo artists in the world, the other one being our mutual friend Carlos Torres, of course. And he's just done a piece on my arm, which I consider to be an extraordinary work of art. And he's also an incredibly knowledgeable watch collector and a really cool human being, and we're going to find out why. Bradley, how are you, sir?
Thank you. How are you, Wei?
Excellent. Thank you so much. Maybe you could just tell me a little bit about how you got started in this hobby.
So I actually got started from my uncle, my godfather actually, so my mom's brother. He's always been into watches. He was a really big fan of IWC, so every time he would wear something fancy on his wrist, I would ask to take a look. And it would always blow my mind, like the kind of figures that he was paying for it, right? I couldn't fathom it because I was a kid, so that kind of 10 grand, 12 grand for a watch just seems weird to me. It was not something I was familiar with. But of course, him educating me along the way about not so much the monetary value of it, but how he saw the sentiment or the sentimental value behind it, to mark certain occasions, to mark certain milestones, and of course, I think it gave me a bit of a deeper understanding into watches, or a different perspective at least.
You know, you mentioned sentimental value, marking special occasions in your life, and you mentioned IWC. And so the first, watch I want to ask you about is this incredible IWC Spitfire, which has an extraordinary history, and one that when I learned about it was deeply touched by. Can I just ask you a little bit about the story about that?
Yeah. So this, I think, is one of the more emotional pieces to me. So the story behind this was. Started off with my second daughter. Before her first birthday, we found a tumor, a mass in her chest, and of course, like, our world was shattered. Right, my wife and I went through a tough time. We lived in the hospital for some time, and fortunately for us, after a barrage of tests and scans and a lot of reviews, she was diagnosed with a very rare case of lipoblastoma, which in the best of the circumstance presented to us, it was good because it wasn't cancer, so it wasn't terminal. But she still wasn't out of the woods, right? So she had a big tumor. It was compromising her airways.
Wow.
And so we had a lot of sit-down consultations with the oncology teams, the radiotherapy, anesthesia teams, and the surgical team as well, right? So. The two head surgeons, Dr. Lee and Dr. Amos, they still, despite them being cancer doctors, they still were pretty invested in this particular patient of theirs, right? My daughter, right? And they wanted to go ahead with the surgery, make sure that everything's okay. And so it was a long surgery, 14 hours, and fortunately for us and for her as well, she made it through and she's recovering. And so after we were kind of out of the woods and things, dust is beginning to settle and all that, my wife and I were really wrecking our heads, like, what do we do? How do we repay them? And we want to show, give them something to show our gratitude, right? So we thought about like whiskey, fruit hamper, food hamper, something like that, right? And being a watch collector myself, I think it's very apt that for them to have given us more time with our daughter, it's only fitting that I give some sort of time back to them. Yeah, so I went out to Hourglass, and as a big IWC fan, I went in looking for the IWC Spitfire, right? And then the salesperson, after hearing my story, he mentioned that he had something special in the bag. So he went to the bag, took out a Tudor GMT, and at the time it was really hot. It was just released by Tudor, and everyone was wanting to get one, right? They were on a waiting list, interest list, and all that. And having seen that in front of me for the first time, of course, I had to get it. I thought, like, okay, let's get a pair like that. I presented it to them. I didn't make a big deal. I just handed them the paper bags, wrote a note inside there, expressing our gratitude, and they took it. And we were happy, moved on with life. My daughter now had to go for very regular checks, right? So she was going in like every week and then slowly they spaced it out every 2 weeks to every month. And I think it must have been like maybe three or 4 months on one of the medical reviews. Dr. Lee was there to oversee the whole review again. So going through all the stats and everything, and like, okay, before you leave, Mr. and Mrs. Tan, I do have something to tell you. And naturally, I think that no, like any news is bad news in a hospital, right? So our heart sinks. And then we're like, oh, what is it now? And then he turns around, he pulls out from the drawer, he pulls out the hourglass bag. And then he's like, I cannot accept this. And I think it took us by surprise as well, because it's something that was, one, in the past already, and two, it was like a genuine gift, right? So we were questioning him like, no, we were kind of insisting to pass it on to him. And his reasons were valid, he mentioned that he took an oath, a vow to do this for the greater good. And something like this is inappropriate because sometimes his colleagues or his co-workers might look at it as a bribe or an incentive to take more care of this particular patient of some sort, right? And he was, he insisted that we have it. So now it's back in my hands, and this is one of the pieces that will never leave my collection. It is very, very, very sentimental to me.
Yeah, you were telling me that every time you look at it, it reminds you of this incredible moment that you had with your wife and your second daughter.
Yeah.
Sitting up late, worried about her, and so on. And so, I mean, that's a pretty remarkable timepiece.
It is. It reminds me of them as well. They are miracle workers, right? Like they saved my daughter's life, and even if he had accepted this, it wouldn't have been enough. I would have given him anything that I could possibly give, right? Yeah. So it is very special to me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So let's go from there to, so I see you've got 2 Pateks with us today.
Yes, I do.
You've got an Aquanaut on your wrist, and you've got one of my favorite watches, actually, the Nautilus annual calendar. Tell us a little bit about these 2 watches.
So, as you know, Patek Philippe's very famous tagline, you don't actually own a Patek, you merely look after it for the next generation. So to mark my first daughter's birth, I was already a watch collector, but I had wanted to go out and pick up a Patek Philippe. Whenever I get into a conversation with a fellow watch lover, they either stand on both sides, right? They either love the tagline or they're kind of a bit iffy about it, right?
Of course.
And I love it. I just absolutely love the copywriting is on point. It's a testament to them making timepieces and these little engineering marvels that last generations.
Right.
And of course, when we first found out, my wife and I first found out that we were expecting our first kid, this was back in 2016, I was already collecting some watches, and I really, really wanted to get this piece just to mark the birth of my first child. I hunted everywhere for this particular piece because I just like that it's a complication, plus it had a moon face on it. It was a bit chunkier than your typical 5711.
Right.
It was a bit thicker than your 5712. But it was difficult to get at the time. I would walk into a boutique and ask them for this particular piece, and then they were like, sorry sir, we don't have it in stock, but how about a 5711 or 5712 or 5980, and like, no, I just kind of want this piece. So I managed to get it from a friend who managed to hunt one down for me at the time, and it was my daily beater for a while, for a few years. And it was, if you look at it, there's dings and scratches and everything. I used even like stencil marks in the back of the strap and all that, right? I used this watch up until I think the watch market exploded. And then people started to take notice of the value of it. Oh man, look at your watch. Do you know that that's worth so much and so much, right? And I think that kind of pushed me a little bit, became a bit more cautious about wearing it around, and I think it ends up sitting in my safe more than it does on my wrist, sadly. But I do love it, and I take it out for special occasions, and it is a very special watch to me as well.
I love that watch because it unites 2 of the iconic inventions of Philippe Stern, Thierry Stern's dad. Yeah. The Nautilus, of course, which was created under his behest, and also the annual calendar complication, which was also one of his signature inventions as well, or at least he introduced it to wristwatch format. So I love that watch. Tell me a little bit about the Aquanaut.
So the Aquanaut is like I told you as well, right? I've never ever really gravitated much to the Aquanaut. Partly because I think it looks like the Nautilus's goofy little brother, right? It kind of is a bit more subdued, a bit more subtle, and a bit thinner. So again, to mark my second daughter's birth, right? I think I was going to go out and hunt for a watch, not particularly a Patek Philippe, but just any watch, right? And at the time, coincidentally enough, two of my friends, Kim and Shamik, so Kim had picked one up, and he was raving and like, oh Brad, you should check this out, and like, it really sits so well, I can wear it with anything, I'm in suits all day and it slides under the cuff, and like, he was just like really hyping it up, right? So I was just like, nah, I'm not really that interested in it. And then Shamik says, I don't mind picking one up, Brad, can you follow me? So we meet up, we go and pick that up. And after that, once they both had it, they were kind of twinning and showing it off, and like
Nice.
just like what watch lovers do, right?
Right.
So I was like, okay, fine, hand it over. I want to put it on. And the minute I slipped it on, and it was like, sealed the deal for me, man. In the next few weeks, I'm going to go and pick one up. And this watch actually was the watch that accompanied me throughout the whole hospital journey as well. So this watch was on my wrist when I picked up my daughter, her unconscious body, we were giving her a bath, it was whacking into things, and like we were rushing into going into surgery and stuff like that. So the battle scars on this watch were from the hospital as well. I mean, when I picked it up, it was pristine, clean,
right?
Like all nice and polished, and like how you would expect a watch to be when you buy one, right? Like, oh, it's all shiny and it's all new, don't make sure you don't ding up the corners or the lugs or anything. And then now I look at it and like, I like that it looks like that. Every little ding, every little scratch, every little odd little marking that some people might say would affect its value in some way, right? But it doesn't, it adds value to me. Yeah, very much so.
So I want to ask you one last question, which is about the watch I'm wearing. Because you told me that this caliber in here is actually one of your favorite movements.
Yes.
And I love the fact that you're such a connoisseur. I handed this to you and you were like, don't tell me. And then you got the reference immediately. So tell me a little bit about that and why you like that watch.
So this is a 5402?
Correct, sir.
Right? And I think I showed you yesterday, I have a tattoo on my thigh here. I'm a big AP fan. I've always been a big Audemars Piguet fan. This is the grail, right, for the Royal Oak series at least. And I've been fortunate enough to own a number of Royal Oaks, from the Offshore series to the Royal Oak series, and I love them, and they're iconic. They wear really well. I particularly like your 15202 or your 5402 if you can get your hands on one of these.
Sure. Right.
I mean, I have a small wrist, so they sit a lot better. They're 39mm, and it's fantastic. It's their signature ultra thin, which is just amazing, right? I love the subtle details in there, that the AP logo is down at 6 o'clock. There's no second hand. Everything's really clean, really nice, and it's iconic.
And you're telling me you like the caliber 2121?
2121. I had a friend who was a client of mine who became a really dear friend, and he loves doing pencil drawings, which naturally I like as well because I'm a black and gray guy. And so he started doing a few different types of portrait drawings, and then he transitioned into watch movement drawings. His name is Marcus. And so when he started doing a few movement pieces for some people who commissioned him, I was like, oh man, I need to get my hands on one of those. So I reached out to him, and I really wanted him to do a 2121 movement for me, right? Because it's my grail watch.
Right.
I really love, and I would want to own one day. And so he had a long waiting list and a lot on his plate, so he took some time before he even began that. So by the time he got round back to me a year later, after I reached out to him, he was like, hey man, I'm going to start. So how would you like your movement to be like? Can you tell me more about where you want to frame this, how big you want to do it? And I was like, as much as you and I both watch lovers, we love the 2121 caliber, right? But can you do the 324 SC caliber? Right? Because my daughter just got discharged, and like I think it's special that you did it. So cool. Behind us is
that's it right there, right?
Yeah, that's it right there. So that's the drawing that he did. And I think on the surface, when people look at it, it's really impressive on its own. But being an artist myself, he did not cheat at all with this. So as an artist, if you are pencil drawing, you would use certain different tools to create certain different effects, right? And none of that, he's done that before, but he explained to me as we were going through the piece as well, he did that, no cheating, he went in full pencil, no using of a tortillon, no using of erasers or anything like that, he just went in bit by bit, and it took him 4 months. Every day he would work on it for about anywhere between like 40 minutes to an hour and a half, every day for 4 months to get that out, framed it, jumped on a bus with a giant frame to come over here, presented it to me, and I was so honored. Yeah, I was so honored.
That's awesome, dude. Well, Bradley, you know, you're a genius tattoo artist, a great human being, and an incredible watch collector. So thank you so much for your time, brother.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure's mine, sir.
Thank you.
Cheers. So my grandfather gave each of his sons a paddock, right? Calatrava, you know, very simple Calatrava. And for a while, like, I was a bit pissed off because when my brother was in his 20s, he asked my dad for it, right?
Okay.
And I was always like, but you know, I'm the watch guy, right?
Right.
And I'm the older brother. Like, that kind of should be my watch, right? But you know, I never really said anything. And then it was interesting. I was at his 50th birthday party yesterday, and hanging out with my nephew, who I love. Obviously, he's a great kid, you know. And he's 14 years old, and he was wearing the watch, right? And then it didn't bother me anymore. In fact, it made me happy because it's like, okay, it's actually it's being passed on to like another person in the family who's going to take care of it. That's cool, you know.
It would have been different if your brother took it and sold it or something, right? Or
Dude, that would suck.